Hey, in our previous episode, we talked about politics, the role that politics plays in our wellness, how we react to the news about politics, how politics basically affects every area of our society. And a lot of people seem to like it, particularly the fact that we were encouraging the conversation about politics and religion because they go together many times, right? And they're inseparable in many ways. And so people agree to the fact that it's almost been a taboo for us to discuss politics, whether it's around a dinner table with your family or parties with friends, simply because politics can be an issue that becomes very quickly, it can escalate and become really emotional. People have very strong opinions about politics, and some are opinions that are well informed, some opinions that are not so well informed. And so there's a lot going on there. And it certainly creates a sense of uncertainty, anxiety, and stress. And so what we wanted to do is, just contribute to that conversation and open it up so people can feel more relaxed about talking about politics, and to see politics and religion as not something that's necessarily antagonistic, something that you need to disagree with, but something that that conversation can help you learn a little bit more about the opinion of the other person, or the beliefs and views the other person holds. And so I think it is our belief here in this podcast that the more we talk about politics and religion, the more it becomes something that we no longer fear, right? And it's something that will move the needle in terms of the political discourse, particularly in today's political climate, right? So what we want to do in this episode is continue the conversation, talk about some of the things that are really making people anxious, but also talk about some of the ways that we can, move forward and make it better. So that's what it's all about, right? So I hope you enjoy the episode. I'll see you later.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Think Well. Happy 4th of July.
Yes, happy 4th of July to all of our American viewers and the millions. Yeah.
And happy belated 1st of July, Canada
Day.
Yes.
Which happened on Tuesday.
Correct.
Which means that we are going to continue to talk about politics, simply because
that we are.
Those two dates are very important part of the political discourse, the history of Canada and the United States. But we're not going to get into history. We're just going to start ranting right away about the current political situation. But yeah, no, I think it's cool that you mentioned that you wanted to continue the conversation because you got a lot of feedback from people
Yeah.
And they're very happy that we talked about that, because it's something that, as we were saying, it's something that it's almost taboo to talk about politics, even today with social media and so much information around us. Still creates a lot of tension. Mm-hmm. People don't know how to bring the subject up without being confrontational. If I can bring it up, you had a friend say that that was kind of you can take it from here.
Yeah, I have a dear friend who I absolutely love, and I was just sharing, my thoughts about why can't we discuss politics or religion,
right.
And she was very open about it, and we were back and forth. We didn't agree with everything, but it was fine. Like, it wasn't like, how dare you? There was no emotions. There was no, it was great to be able to talk and hear each other out. Unfortunately, though, when we got to religion, that's when it was, you just don't talk about that. We're done. And, I can respect that. I did say, hey, at the end of the day, we actually did agree that we're all one. And whatever religion, whatever, skin color, political side you're on, we're all one. And we agreed to that, but it was just, that's it. This is where you draw the line. And it was good because it was interesting to see that, because again, like, we still have so much love for each other. And we highly respect each other. It didn't change our relationship at all. Love her to pieces, and I know she loves me to pieces. But it's really interesting to see how some people are very much into what they believe in, and not necessarily it's a bad thing or a good thing. They just aren't willing to be open to hear other sides of religion or politics. So
Yeah, that's interesting, and I think it illustrates the current state of our intellectual wellness, right? And I always talk about that when we are shying away from putting some effort into thinking about things that are important in life, right?
Yeah.
And so we tend to think, well, if it doesn't affect me directly, it's I don't need to think about it. It doesn't doesn't really change who I am, so I don't need to think about that. It's not going to feed me today or clothe me today. So it's one of those things that we don't want to talk about, but there is, at least in the States and Canada, every 4 years, people do need to think about it, at least for a little bit. And I think that's the problem, because if you're not thinking about politics throughout the year, and I'm not saying being like a political head, that you're always reading the political news and staying on top of that. I'm not sure that that's actually a healthy thing to do or not, but an understanding of politics and how society works, right? So religion is on the same page, right? And it's funny that it's really difficult to talk about those two, right?
Yeah.
To go about your day, for example, complaining in your mind or being uncomfortable with certain things that you don't agree with, or not being sure why there's certain things like the economy, for example. That's a big one, right? A lot of people are not happy with, their pay, for example, right? Or they're not happy with how much work they have to do versus their power to be able to participate at work in terms of challenging bosses' ideas and challenging the company's, productivity approach, whatever it is. So those are all things that are political, right? It have to do with the economy, have to do with an economic system embraced by a particular nation, right, or a province or a state. If you don't have a kind of a, just like you don't have to have a super deep analysis, but if you don't have an understanding which leads to your personal analysis of that, you're always going to feel like you're resentful of whatever's going on, and you're going to blame it on typically we end up blaming it on groups in society, right?
Yeah.
Couldn't be more fitting today, right? This is perfect for today. I mean, look at what's happening in the United States of America, where, I mean, the simple logic here of, states could be a safer place. Illegal immigrants are criminals, therefore they're making our country unsafe. And now we need a leader that's going to get rid of these unsafe people, and now we're going to feel safe again. But that's a very simple logic, and it's very easy when you don't spend time thinking about how politics works, how religion works, how the social arrangements in a society work. If you don't spend time thinking about that, then you are going to fall for whatever story they're telling you, right? And if you don't put your intellect to practice and to do the work of breaking things down, analyzing it, doing critical thinking, reading different sources of news. If you don't do that, then when you're confronted with that conversation or a vote that you have to give, what you're going to do is you're going to go with the most simple story that it's being fed to you, because that's what you can do, right? Just again, think of somebody that is not in good physical shape. When the time comes for them to do something that needs to be physical, they're going to choose what's easier for them, right? Which might be taking 2 steps, doing a walk or something like that, instead of like a run or something, or like a tough workout. It's the same thing intellectually, right? No secret, Noam Chomsky has been, an amazing influence for me, and he talks about intellectual self-defense. And he's saying people need to develop that intellectual self-defense, which means just, reading different news sources, listen to different perspectives, and coming up with your own conclusion. But you cannot have a conclusion if you don't have content in your mind and your intellect for that conclusion to happen. So anyways, we're here today, right? July the 4th. It's a very significant day, not only for the United States of America, but I believe for the world, because the states have always been America, as they call it. I don't know if you saw that Diego Luna is that actor from Mexico. He was doing, I think it was, I don't know, was it Tonight Show or whatever?
I don't know what it was, but it was a great skit.
He was saying when he comes to the States, people say, "Welcome to America." It's like, I'm from Mexico. I've been here all my life, right? Yeah. And I remember that's something that you and I, sometimes when we were just playing around, you ask me, and I say, "No, I'm an American." You're like, "You're not an American?" Yes, I live here in America, North, South, Central, it doesn't matter. Yeah. Right? I remember growing up, and I remember being so fascinated with the Declaration of Independence because it laid out a set of principles to live by that are focused on, freedom, of course, freedom of thought, right? Freedom of religion, of course, it's part of it. The pursuit of happiness, right? Mm-hmm. And these are all concepts that are very philosophical that are product of the period of the Enlightenment. And they're very empowering to an individual, and of course to the collective as well. But they can also be applied to, again, somebody's life, right? So in terms of psychology, individual psychology, and personal development, very useful concepts, right? And so that's why we're here today talking about this again, because there's I find that I've always been a big fan of the sort of the core DNA of the United States of America, which again represents the Enlightenment, represents individual freedom, but it also represents, all these principles about democracy and, participation and all that stuff, right? Even constitutionally, how the right to bear arms is protected, coming from a society that endured a 16-year dictatorship, brutal, murderous dictatorship. I see the importance of that. I mean, the argument that I could make, and I used to make as a younger person, is if we had, that sort of freedom to bear arms, and it was so sacredly respected as it is in the United States, I don't know if this guy would have gotten away with killing so many people if people were armed. Then again, the United States of America is probably the country that's, where regular citizens are armed to the teeth, and yet they're still seduced by whatever the government is telling them it's going on. They haven't been able to say, wait a minute here, government, right? So that means that, and again, to quote Chomsky, or paraphrase him anyways, propaganda is to democracy what violence is to a dictatorship, right? And you can totally see it in a place like the United States of America. Just jump in. I don't want to take over.
No, you love this. No, I get it. Yeah, and that's definitely something that we were discussing too. Was you can't just focus on one stream of news, propaganda. You can't just be in your echo chamber. You need to see other facets, whether it's online, independent journalists. I'm not a fan of mainstream media because they're always pushing a narrative, but being able to at least sit there and view a little bit just to get an idea of what the right and the left are doing, I guess, if you want to put it that way. But at the end of the day, just doing your own research and making sure that you're questioning everything. That's always been my thing, question everything. Mm-hmm. Right? So yeah, and one thing that did come up was how we've seen this on a few different forms of journalism, that so ICE is going to Home Depots and construction sites, so where hardworking immigrants go to work, and just taking them away. Right, and so it's not the rapists, the murderers, and all these criminals that were mentioned, saying that, hey, we're going to clean up the states and get rid of all these criminals. It's hardworking individuals. And they're pretty much racially profiling people, which is scary.
100%.
It's scary. That's, like if they're going to focus on one group of people, what makes you think they're going to stop there, right? Who's next? What's the next race that needs to be?
That's the thing, because most people will say, well, no, don't worry. It's not like that. It's not like somebody's next. It's not like if they said that we're going to do this and they're doing it. Maybe they're not perfect, but they're doing it. They're not going to go after any other group after that, right? That's what people would say if they don't have a historical,
understanding of what happened.
Understanding of what happens, and if they don't have an understanding about political ideologies and how shit gets done, right? And if they don't have an understanding of, mechanisms of oppression that are used by the elites, right?
Yeah.
And when I say elites, I'm not talking about conspiracy theory elites. I'm just talking about real elites, the people that have control over the means of production and resources and stuff.
And the same people who are telling you all that the immigrants are taking your jobs.
Well, okay, so let's talk about ICE.
Yes.
First of all, I think the statement, it's necessary. Fuck ICE. Mm-hmm. And I tell you why. Because just a kind of a descriptive thing that I want to do is about ICE is they're a paramilitary group of heavily armed, masked, unidentified, mostly men, but there's some women there too, that are going around disappearing people. Now, if I tell you this without telling you anything, completely out of context, if I say to you, there's a group of men, heavily armed, they're masked, so you don't know who they are. They don't tell you who they are. They come from behind, they grab you. They, you're subdued and they arrest you. They put, handcuffs on you. They take you away, you disappear. You could end up in a prison, you could end up in a detention center, you could end up in another country, right? Yeah. Okay, so even the most, how to put it, the most novice of students of politics and history would say, well, that's typical of a dictatorship, right? That happens in places like Chile and Argentina and places like that during the dictatorships in Indonesia and all that. That's a typical technique. You take Colombia was one of the most recent places, and that is happening in the freest and most democratic nation in the world, the United States of America. So these are thugs, and thugs are always cowards, right? You know that bullying people, it's cowards. It's a thing of cowards, right? If you have the guts to stand up for something, you're not acting. You might still be afraid of the consequences, but you know that's right, and you're still gonna, stand up for what's right? But the cowards I'm talking about is a real definition of a coward, somebody that hides in the shadows. And I think I talked about this last time. If I didn't, I'll repeat it again. It's so important because this is not just being upset about something that's going on. This is not taking a political side or anything like that. When you have a country where there are masked armed men, unidentified masked armed men that are going around taking people by force, disappearing, and they're above the law, right? They're above the law. This is it's not constitutional, right?
Yeah.
And doing that, I'd like to give you the avatar, the profile of somebody that does that. And I know because when I grew up in Chile during a dictatorship, I knew people that signed up for this, right? And these are people that are heavily, they're determinedly fucked up, okay? So you have people that have not been forced to do this type of work, right? When you work for customs, when you work for immigration, there's a set of principles and rules, and there's a mission that you follow, right?
Yeah.
If I work for customs or immigration, if somebody comes to the border or something like that, I'm going to do my job, right? These are extracurricular activities for somebody like that, right? These are people that it's not a draft. So these are not people that are regular citizens that are forced into doing this type of work, right? These are people that are getting paid and they're volunteering to do this job. They're not getting paid $1 million an hour. So we can make that argument, well, even maybe I would do that job if, as unethical as it is, but fuck, the money's good. No, these are people that are probably getting paid, I don't know, anywhere from $50,000 to, I don't even think they might that would get $100,000 US for what they do, right? So it's not like they're making a lot of money. So what is keeping them in a job like that? It's because they enjoy it, because they're bigots and they're cowards, because they are in the shadows of society, waiting, not saying a word. I don't want to say a word because I might get in trouble, you know, how it is today. No, how is it today, Mr. Ice? Well, you know, you can't say anything against women or men or women or minorities because you're going to get in trouble. Yeah, what kind of trouble are you going to get into? They're going to disappear you? No, but, you know, they have these places that are called DEI, these things that can get you in trouble. They can write you up at work or give you a warning, or worse, they can send you to, you know, sensitivity training, right? That is totally un-American, right? So in the meantime, they're hiding in the shadows, waiting for that cultish leader that's going to be elected, so he can give him, he or she, but in this case, he can give them the green light so they can come out of the closet and practice their bigotry and their racism and their violence on people that are unarmed, people that are helpless, right? And they do this with pleasure, right? And this is why you can carry out a horrible attack on your population, right? Using their own, we talked about taxpayers' dollars. Where are they going? They're going to fund wars somewhere else. But look at what's going on now. They're funding their own war against their own people, right?
Which they don't see it as their own people, but yeah,
right.
I hear what you're saying.
So just to finish on the ICE thing, so these are people that are actually enjoying it. Why are they all masked, not saying, hey, this is an agent of a government agent and I'm going to read you your rights and all that. The reason they're wearing a mask, right, is because I saw this in Chile when I was growing up, because the guy that's going to abuse you, he could be John Smith that lives down the street. He's one of your neighbors that you see when you go to the grocery store and he's around with his family. He doesn't want you to know because they're cowards. Again, we established that, right? I established that unilaterally. So these are cowards. They don't want you to know that he's just John Smith that lives 10 houses down the street. He's your neighbor, but he's a fucking bigot and he's armed to the teeth, right? Because from that point on, he's going to have to be fearing for his own safety, because now when people know that he's a bigot, right, and he's armed to the teeth, and when he's given the opportunity to come out of the closet and act his hatred on other people, he will do it, right? And most of us are not like that, right? So the mask serves as many things, right? It serves as intimidation for people. It serves as, intimidation for people. Again, if you are an agent of the federal government with a badge number and that's a decent job, you should have no problem, like police officers.
Yeah, you can ask for their badge number, their names, and they have to tell you.
And the reason is because they're running around doing what they want to do. Now, I tell you what that leads to. If this continues, it will lead to several violations of crimes against humanity. Right? Yeah. It will lead to perhaps rape. It will lead to, of course, beating up people and torturing people. It will lead to free labor, because now they're building at camps, you know, like Alcatraz that they're so proud of. And so this is a very concerning time in history for a country that most of the world admires for having that core, you know, idea that we should be free and we should be, able to get along, you know, and we should be a peaceful society, and democracy and freedom and a good economic system should be able to provide set up the environment and set up all the conditions for this to happen, right, and to be a society that thrives. And that's exactly the opposite, right, of what's going on today. Right. So anyway, I'll stop there with this whole ICE thing, but I'd love to talk more about it if you like. But.
Yeah, no, that's true. It's valid. Yeah, it's interesting. Like, where does it go from here? That's my concern. Like right now, it's one racial group. You know, Mexican, Central American, pretty much anyone that's Hispanic, right? Where does it go from there? It doesn't end there, right? That's the scary part. And, you know, part of me, I do agree that everywhere around the world, if I were to go to, what country? India, and I decide, you know what, my tourist visa is expired, I'm going to stay. Well, chances are if I am caught, I do time in jail. Like that's across the board. Like that's pretty much what happens, right? So I understand the idea that if you're coming in illegally, there is repercussions for that. However, before Trump got into power, the previous administration allowed apparently a lot of people in saying, come on in, America is open. So what was the tactic there? Like this is definitely planned. I believe politics is a theater. Like there's no right or left or red or blue. I just believe that it's all constructed by elites. That's my personal belief. So these same people who came in 4 years ago more to a very welcoming America through the border, no papers, no questions asked, come on in, even during COVID when people were supposed to be protecting themselves. Now they're being pretty much hunted, right? So it just doesn't make sense.
But yeah, okay, so you're creating the problem and then you get the solution. The solution
That's
is Mr. Trump's solution to get rid of all the people. He's not only giving the middle finger to law and order or the other way around to illegal stuff, but he's also giving the middle finger to, if it is true that Democrats were allowing people to come in. Oh, we can talk about that. We can talk about immigration, illegal immigration. I think you're right. I mean, there are laws, of course, and they have to be respected.
Yeah.
You know, this is something that's been going on forever. I mean, because we'll look at things differently. If you live in France and I am not a French citizen and I come and visit France and we fall in love over French baguette and croissant and red wine and cheese, right? All that, the cliches about that. And then I was like, I don't want to leave you. Let's say you can't leave France and I want to overstay my visa. Most people would go, oh, right, that's not bad. You know, those are humanitarian reasons, right? If you get sick, if you're a family member, like you should not separate families, which is what's going on in the United States right now. And there's always been provisions for that in most countries in immigration laws, right? So if you marry somebody or, so it's love and family and all that kind of stuff, right? That said, the immigration, for example, in Canada, right, as it has been in the States, we could argue in the States that's not necessary anymore, but immigration in places like Canada, Scandinavian nations, it's necessary because the birth rate, so the death rate exceeds the birth rate, right? So if you have no more people coming in, you're going to get to the point where you have an aging population and you're going to go bankrupt. You can't pay, pensions and retirements and, healthcare and all that kind of stuff, right? So a country needs immigration for that and also to continue to strengthen their economy, right? Now, the states can very easily have that sort of, thing still going on, right? And the thing, though, is when people see immigration as a problem, right? Talk about illegal immigration. Let's talk about illegal immigration in the United States of America and in Europe. Because if you look at the I would say 99.9% of the nationalities that are actually entering the country either illegally as refugee claimants, because to obtain immigration and resident permits to come into a country, you have to have meet a particular criteria, and that criteria typically is you have to have money already, right? You have to have a good profession. You have to be good at whatever language they speak. So that you have to have a whole bunch of things there. And most people living in desperate conditions around the world do not have that. They don't meet that criteria. I'm not a freaking engineer that went to a prestigious university because I had the money. I just fucking struggle in my life. I want a better life. What's my argument about this? I saw a sign one time at an immigration protest, and I loved it. It said, "We are here because you were there." And that is a lot in there, right? So you look at the nations that are wanting to enter the United States or places in Europe, These are all nations that have colonized other parts of the world. And the people that were colonized centuries ago are still, feeling the repercussions, the negative impact of that brutal colonization, right? Some of them were more brutal than others, right?
Yeah.
And they have actually intentionally underdeveloped, so I'm using that as it's a verb, underdeveloped the nations so that they can maintain them there as a source of cheap labor, as a source of cheap resources, right? To continue to enrich themselves, right? And so if we understand that, right, and if we acknowledge it, maybe I'm being a little bit more, of course, people say, well, you're on the left, so of course you're saying something like this. But it's look it up. It's what it is. You and I come from countries, or I guess I come from a country, your family comes from a country where the Spaniards came and took every fucking thing. Life, dignity, gold, silver, whatever they could get their hands on, right? And they left us with a language, right? And they left us with some traditions. One of them is Catholicism. And they left us with all that shit, right? And so if you have a wave of people from Chile, for example, which I can say, if Chile is in bad condition, which is not, right? But if they were to be in really, really bad shape economically and in many other ways, if you have a wave of those people fleeing Chile to go to Spain, right? I say you have to fucking let them in, first of all, because that would be the right thing to do. And if you're not letting them in and they still get in, well, these are the things that happen for a reason. There's an origin to this, right?
Yeah.
I'm not just excusing people that are willingly trying to commit a crime or something like that, which would probably be the minority.
People who are here,
You went
to be hardworking.
to my nation. You fucking did everything that you could to call yourself a powerful empire. Well, now guess what? And so this happened in the United States as of late in history because the United States has, it's the imperial power.
Well,
right?
And let's not forget, Mexico's borders didn't start where they are right now.
100%.
Right? So that's the hypocrisy. And I don't know if we talked about this in the first episode.
I don't know, but talk about it again.
That's the hypocrisy of it. It's just Mexico, there's not a line. That line didn't exist. Mexico reached past California, New Mexico, Arizona, Texas.
California, Colorado, listen to the names. They're all in Spanish.
All in
California,
Spanish.
Colorado, right?
So
Mexico.
It's infuriating because there you are in your homeland and someone says, nope, mine. And then when you're trying to get to your homeland or the new land, you're being called an illegal alien. That's your birthright. That's what's infuriating for me. That we can have a whole other podcast about that.
It's just about that because now you're touching on something, for example, what's happening in Israel right now, right?
Yeah.
With kind of a
with
right
Palestine,
of return,
yeah,
right of return based on a biblical interpretation, right?
Yeah.
And I'm not being disrespectful. I think first of all, I have to say this, right? When it comes to the project of building your own nation after you've been persecuted and murdered and all that, I love that idea because I would take, fortunately I can't say I take my ancestors, indigenous people and come up with their own country. We kind of have that. It's called reservations in our own land, and I don't think that it would be our place to get up and go to another land to
claim,
to impose and say, yeah. But I see the idea. The idea is so freaking powerful that you have been persecuted, murdered, genocide has been committed on you, and all of a sudden you have the opportunity to start your own nation. I'm all behind that, right? But now that that's happening now, there's a whole bunch of things that need to be defined and clarified and all that when it comes to borders and indigenous peoples living there and all that kind of stuff. So we're not going to get into that now, but it's what we're talking about. Mexico. You and I have been to California. Right? California it's a Mexican state.
I spent a lot of time in Mexico, and it's so dear to my heart. I actually thought I was Mexican when I was growing up here in Canada. I was very confused.
Is that right?
I did,
right?
yeah. Because when I was,
parents,
Well, when I was really young, my father passed away. My mom went back to Bolivia with my sister and I. And then we came back to Canada because she realized we have a better opportunity here. And we're born here in Canada. So she met my dad. And I remember vividly, we had this Mexican hat over our living room couch. And it was big and beautiful, and it was Mexican. And I guess a family friend went to Mexico and brought that home for them. So the whole time I know we're from Bolivia, but at 4 years old, I created that Bolivia is a province or a city in Mexico.
Right.
Because to me, of course, we're Mexican. Like there's a sombrero.
That's cute.
You know. So, anyways, my grade 1 teacher, Mrs. Puglia,
She broke the news to you.
She broke. Yeah, she was talking to my parents. Person. Well, no, she didn't break it to me, but she was talking to my parents, and she loved Mexico. She was there on her honeymoon. I actually remember this. It's so funny. And she's like, "What part of Mexico are you from?" And my parents were like, "No, we're not. We're not from Mexico. We're from Bolivia. My dad's from Ecuador." And she was like, "Huh." So when my parents got home, they're like, "We need to talk."
Yeah.
You're not from Mexico. I'm like, "Yeah, we're from Mexico."
How old were you?
I think I was like, well, I want to say it was grade 1, but I think it was maybe SK or maybe JK. I don't know. I was very young, very young.
You're forgiven.
So my parents were like, "You're actually from Bolivia."
You're forgiven.
And I was like, "Yeah, that's in Mexico." It's like, no. Bolivia is a separate country. Yeah, in Mexico. So anyways, I always had this love for Mexico just because I had a bit of an identity crisis when I was little. But being in Mexico, it was pretty much, I spent a good while there. And when I went to California, we were in Santa Monica. There's some parts that was Mexico. It was Mexico.
But it was part of Mexico.
That's the thing. Like it was, it's.
You know, and that brings this is not the first time that the American government has gathered, whatever they want to call it, people, Mexicans, and sent them back to Mexico. They did that several times throughout the centuries.
Did that through the
after
Obama
the
administration.
War was won and after all that. So it's not something new, right?
And it's not.
There's a scapegoat all the time. You know, what's going on in our society? Well, the politicians can't get their shit together. They're ripping us off. They're taking Medicare away in the United States, right? 12 million people are going to be affected.
Yeah.
As of yesterday, I believe. How do you divert that attention and let people focus on something else? Well, let's find people that are voiceless. I mean, how many illegals can go to a television station or do something like what we're doing to voice their opinion?
Yeah.
They're voiceless. And there's nothing more cowardly than blaming somebody that is completely defenseless, right? And perpetrating criminal acts on them, right?
Yeah.
That's what's happening right now. So it's understandable from a strategic point of view of the evil minds of politics, right? Well, let's fucking blame it on the Mexicans. What the hell, right? It's it's instead of. Well, I mean, we talk about so many aspects of transparency in terms of economics, their tax laws, what they're trying to do with taxes, what they're planning to do with the distribution of resources, all that kind of stuff, right? So it's always been there, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess in the context, I don't want it just to be this a rant, right? Obviously, a lot of people would disagree with me, but I think in the context of wellness in general, whole health for us, you had a personal experience where, you saw that, the need for a conversation to be had with the community, with people at work, with people in your community, with family members, and to make sure that the conversation of religion and politics is not taboo, right?
Yeah.
So that we can all talk about this and not be confrontational all the time.
Yeah, just be open.
Yeah, I mean, that's what a healthy democracy is supposed to be like, right?
Yeah. I mean, for me, I feel like television in itself is just propaganda 101 with everything. Like, I think that.
What do you mean? Like movies?
Well, I don't, you know me, I don't really care for movies, but what I'm saying is like
there's
news.
movies and movies.
Okay.
Yeah, as somebody that appreciates the art of filmmaking. I think there's
No, I know, I get that.
and plus it's a
I
very
do
powerful
like some
tool.
movies, and yes, we do have some that we
Yeah, I
do
think
enjoy.
you're
But
talking about-
I'm talking about the news,
Well,
right?
we're
Like
talking
that's
about
a
mainstream
huge.
blockbusters that are nothing but a 2-hour commercial for
Yeah.
American
So no,
companies,
what
right?
I'm talking about is the propaganda. So while Trump was running, he was saying before he became the president, he was going on about how we're going to get rid of the criminals, right? And I kept on seeing, what do you call those, mugshots of Hispanic men who sexually assaulted 12-year-olds, 13-year-olds, raped, murdered. And you keep seeing that. And I like, for me, I kept seeing that thinking, that's not
I remember
cool.
telling you about that.
Not
yeah.
cool. And then I forget where this poll was, and I really should have taken a screenshot of it. But it was out of all the criminals that came through, and they weren't all from like Central and South America. They were from all over the world. It was 8%. That's still high. Like, first off, no child should be hurt, you know, whether you're an immigrant or born into a country, no child should be sexually assaulted. You know what I mean? But it was 8%, but he was running on that, and all his, you know, elite news media henchmen were pushing that narrative, right? So, you know, when you take a step back and you see, well, it's 8%, still, I think it's way too high, but it's not 80%, where 80% of all these people need to get out because they're criminals. That's not fair.
Oh, it's right now.
Right,
It's,
and
it's
that's
more
what-
than that.
that's
It's
what-
100%, right?
Well, now it's
They're going for
100, and it's
100%.
even people who were born in the United States who are citizens. And now, when you know, ICE brings in a Hispanic-looking woman saying, you know, she's an alien, she's an illegal alien. Oh no, look, she's American. Well, she hit one of our ICE officers, so we're going to detain her
And perhaps deport her.
deport her.
And revoke her citizenship. Yeah,
Right?
I mean,
So
that's
it's
Nazi Germany 101, and it's not
yeah,
pretend. It's not pretend, and it's not, again, an attack on American people. We all
No,
love American people.
we
We
do.
have friends, we have families and stuff like that. It's an attack on the powerful elites that have not been able to. They have a thirst that cannot, you know,
quench
quench
But
at
the thing-
all
The thing is, though, like,
for power.
when you look at this, like, yes, they're so drunk on power, and we call them powerful. We're giving them that power, but they're really not. Like, we outnumber them.
Well,
We may
that's-
be
I think
considered
that that's-
peasants, right? The little peasants down here, they're not in charge of Apple, they're not in charge of CNN, they're not in charge of Walmart. They're our consumers.
Well, this
But
is
we
why
are-
intellectual wellness
yeah, like
is
we
important.
are in power.
Okay, so I'm really happy that you mentioned that we have the power, and that's the thing. This is why it's important to have conversations. So, for your own health, right, your own mental health, it's important that you develop the practice of trying to understand things like this, right? Like what's happening in society, right? Why is it that I'm not getting a promotion at work? Why is it that, you know, they're laying off people? Why is it that, you know, they're laying off nurses or whatever? Why is it that, you know, there's a problem with hospitals? You have to know in the context of a national, you know, plan, right? What's going on? You have to know the difference. So much is being, you know, mentioned about capitalism versus socialism, right? Let's not even go to communism, but between those two, people without understanding that, they get into heated arguments or debates that without really having any meat there to be able to talk about it, right? And so it's important to understand those things, right? For your own personal mental health, right? So you feel like you're part of a community and you're participating meaningfully in your own nation, right? And second, a collective intellectual wellness is important because, again, as you said, we have the power, right? So most of us think, well, the elites do what they want. I'm just going to roll with the punches. No, because we have the power. And this is why they still haven't killed us all or whatever they need to do, because they need us. They need us. And through the vote, that's one of them, right? And our participation, our active participation. The vote doesn't mean much now.
No.
But if we get involved in our communities, if we get involved individually and collectively, and we turn the volume up on independent voices, right? Not just talking about people like Bernie Sanders, people like that have a sort of a third perspective, that's between capitalism and, socialism. But there are other voices too that we haven't heard, right? When you go vote, people, do one thing. When I vote, I never get to the booth and say, oh, I think I'm going to decline my vote for this independent candidate because they're not known and probably not going to win any votes anyway, so I'll give it to either, good evil or bad evil, whether that's the Conservative Party or, or the Liberal Party. I still cast my vote for somebody, even if that's just 3 votes that person got. Mm-hmm. But that's important. We need to exercise that, because the more people vote for independent voices, the more they'll be able to put them in national debates on TV and things like that, and people are going to be exposed to different ideas.
Yeah.
So there is just that is very simple to do if you don't want to get too complicated, and if you want to start reading about socialism and capitalism, what's the difference, which I would definitely recommend that. It takes a couple of books to get a good level of information there for you to have to make decisions. And so you're not told like a little kid on the news, oh, socialism is bad and this and that, so that you can make your own decision. And I say that because I've seen a lot of that with the mayoral candidate in the United States in New York, who is, he says, has socialist ideas and also, of course, democratic ideas and all that. But, they're treating him as a terrorist and,
It's because he's Muslim.
A traitor. Yes, but on top, that's for the crowds to get distracted with the Muslim religious thing. What they're really afraid of is the economic policies based on socialist values, mm-hmm. right? And socialist planning, because some people are going to get free stuff. Can you believe that in the U.S.? It's not free. It's just like we don't get free healthcare here. We have to pay for mm-hmm. our taxes. It's just managed differently.
Yeah.
And it's managed to benefit people, not managed to benefit one group only, right? Yeah. And so, this is the important thing of being able to hear different voices. And that, again, it's going to create a nice health in your intellect, because now your intellect is going to be filled with content that actually makes a difference, content that is useful and helpful for you to even plan a family. If you're somebody young that's planning to have a family, are you going to be able to plan a family if you don't understand concepts like, economic, systems, political systems, how religion plays a role in there? Because your kids are going to grow up, your family can be torn apart, when things, go south, as they say, right? Because if we don't have a good understanding of those things, right, and your own opinion that's been formed about it, it's going to be very difficult to not only face possible horrors coming our way, but, also to make decisions that can prevent those horrors.
Absolutely. So you have autonomy to learn. And I would even suggest, instead of getting your information from here or from a screen, any screen, read a few books. Like, I think that's way more than...
We need to do that, absolutely.
Yeah, more impactful than... Because, again, this is another tool for propaganda. Let's be real.
Of course, yeah.
Right, so...
this thing is glued to our hands right now,
yeah,
so
I think
prisoners of it.
Yeah, I would go to the route of books, and if you don't like to read, listen to the audio version of it. But yeah, definitely have the... I always say this, when we say we don't have time, we do have time. Put this away, use it for what it's for, calls and texts.
We always make time for the important
make time to read, a chapter a day, to educate yourself. I think that's really important because, again, we are the majority. We have the power.
Yeah.
So let's not give in to...
taxes.
Yeah.
There you go. So that's part of having power. Maybe we can touch on that next session.
I have my
Why
issues
it's important to pay taxes. Anyway.
It is important for certain things. I get that. But again, anyways, I won't say anymore.
Okay, well.
But yeah.
Okay.
So.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.
Lovely discussion. Thank you very much.